Welcome to Changing Higher Ed, a podcast dedicated to helping higher education leaders improve their institutions. My name is Dr. Drum McNaughton, and I'm the CEO of The Change Leader, a management consultancy that helps university leaders create sustainable higher ed institutions through holistic approaches to strategic management, university academics and operations, change management, leadership, and governance. Our podcast brings you the latest in higher ed news, as well as some of the top experts in our profession who will share with you their perspectives on how you can grow your institution. Rob Hartman is the Chief Financial Officer for Columbia International University, and he's one of those top-notch CFOs who knows both finance and business. He's been in finance and education a long time, nearly 30 years, and has served a number of Christian colleges that include Ohio Christian, Indiana Wesleyan, and Union Bible College. Rob earned his BA from Union Bible College and an MBA from Indiana Wesleyan University, and he's a senior certified professional with the Society of Human Resource Management, SHRM. Rob says, and I'm quoting him, "I'm pretty boring. I don't hunt, fish, golf, run, work out, play sports, tinker, or build things with my hands. But I love what I do, and I guess that's enough." Well, today we're going to have the opportunity to see that Rob is anything but boring, especially when it comes to higher ed. He definitely knows what he's talking about. Rob, well, thanks for being on the show today. Greatly appreciate it.
It's a pleasure, Drum. Thanks for having me. I've been looking forward to it.
Likewise. Gosh, and we've got so many things to talk about today. I think first off is we all know there's differences between the CFO and your controller. But there's a lot of other institutions, especially young presidents coming into the job, and if they've not got a finance background, they wouldn't necessarily know that. So from your perspective, what's the philosophical differences between a CFO and a controller?
Well, it's a great question. I've actually served both functions in a very small college, two very small colleges, and I wouldn't call it a disaster, but I would call it certainly a mixture of talents that weren't mixed very well, if I could put it that way. Certainly, I understand the fiscal issues that come with having two finance-type professionals, but the CFO and the controller functions are so different that when the CFO tries to be the controller, I would call the chief bean counter, for lack of a better term, then you're really not doing the leadership job that you should be doing as chief financial officer, because chief financial officer in most organizations includes not just finance, not just accounting, but the operations, in many cases security, in some cases financial aid. It's just so much broader, and it should be more of a strategic 30,000-foot perspective instead of a day-to-day bean countery, plug in the numbers and make sure the balance sheet balances. There are accounting professionals that should be doing that, and it shouldn't be the CFO. I know sometimes that's absolutely necessary in a small organization, but get away from it as soon as you can, because you won't grow without it, in my opinion.
I think you're absolutely right. The best CFOs that I have seen, frankly, they have some accounting background, but their background is more operations and can look at the broad picture and understand how the pieces work together. Does that make sense?
Yes, sir. It makes perfect sense. And I agree with you 100%. You've got to be able to look at the big picture, and you do have to have an operational mindset, not just to know how to plug in the numbers and make the balance sheet balance, but how do the numbers speak to the organization's overall health? And how do you get all the players in the organization to the table to see how important that is, that everybody works toward the same ultimate goal? That's a leadership position. It's not a task position. It's a leadership position. And CFOs have to see themselves as leaders and put themselves in that role and lead. You got to lead, or otherwise somebody else is going to lead, and the CFO needs to be one of the key leaders in the organization.
Absolutely. We used to have a saying in the Navy, lead, follow, or get the heck out of the way.
Yeah, that's a great one. I love that. I've never heard that one, but I love it.
Yeah. So the other one that I kind of like is, if you're not the lead dog in the sled team, the view is always the same.
It's not a very pleasant one, is it?
It certainly cannot be. You gave me a great example of something that you're doing at Columbia International that really illustrates the role of a CFO. We were talking about deferred maintenance and some of the ways that you're you're handling that. I know deferred maintenance is huge in colleges right now. I think I read something recently that there's over $2 trillion of deferred maintenance out there, and that's huge.
Yeah, that is huge. I would say that 10 million of that $2 trillion belonged to CIU when I came here a year and about a quarter ago. And we have been able to come up with a creative way of attacking this. And I'm so excited about it. Matter of fact, we've been into the program now, oh my, probably 6 months. And what it is, the HVAC, the lighting, the water, anything that absorbs energy. At this moment in our history, in our nation's history, there are a lot of credits that are available if you upgrade those systems. So not just for those kinds of credits or rebates that you could get from sometimes your electric or your gas utilities, but in addition to that, the savings in utility costs for all that utility consumption, if your physical plant is old enough and inefficient enough, you literally can get an entire new physical plant. When I say physical plant, I mean the functional part of it, the HVAC, the lighting, the water, everything that absorbs energy. You can actually replace the entire plant with no additional cash flow. Now that sounds unbelievable, and it is rather remarkable, I'll be honest with you. And I scratched my head and thought, yeah, I don't believe it. But yet I had 3 different companies come in, show me the numbers. 2 of those 3 said, we will put it in writing. And they said in writing, in a contract, they will guarantee that savings or will pay the difference. Well, make a long story short, we selected one of those 2, Siemens, a big multinational organization. And we've, like I say, been into this about 6 months. And the change in our campus is amazing. The lighting, the HVAC, we're kind of in the middle of it. It's about a year process, depending upon the age and size of your physical plant. And ours is rather significant. The school is almost 100 years old, but our current campus was built in the 60s, late 50s, early 60s, and everything here that is of any kind of energy absorbing appliance is literally that old. So with patches and masking tape or whatever kinds of things they do to patch things up. I did a tour of the campus when I first got here, and I don't mean a tour of the sidewalks and the grass. I mean in the bowels of the earth, so to speak, because I knew from experience this could be a major issue on a campus this age. And sure enough, I was right. And make a long story short, we cut a deal with Siemens, and they're working on our plant right now in a process that'll take about a year or 14 months to replace it all. But I have in writing from them that we will have a zero cash flow effect. Obviously, we'll be paying for this $10 million project over a period of time. But during that period of time, our energy costs will be reduced equivalent of that monthly payment during that period of time. And I've got it in writing. And I've also done the background and found out they've done this elsewhere, not so much in higher ed. They're trying to get their foot in the door in higher ed, but mostly in high schools and some city government type organizations. It's great.
That's a fabulous story. I'm wondering, does that also include going solar?
It doesn't in our case. No, it can. If the environment is right and you have the right kind of footprint on your campus, it could be. What they'll do, they'll come in, they'll analyze your particular situation because no 2 are alike. All of us that have aging physical plants have the similar problem, but the uniquenesses are just that, they're unique. And so they'll do a complete analysis and tell you, here's the largest problems on your campus. If you do these things, we can do this much, and there'll be no out of pocket for you from a cash flow perspective. They will do a deeper analysis, and they, from that point, will say that you could also do this, 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 and this. There will be some out of pocket. We don't consider those the emergency things, but they do give you some options and tell you you could do a deeper dive at additional cost. So I was very impressed with their analysis. I was very impressed with the data and the workbook that they gave us and the promises that they made. And we'll see. I'll be honest with you, we're early enough into it. I haven't seen any savings yet, of course, but I do have their John Henry on a piece of paper that says they'll back it. And it's a global organization. It's not a local jackleg organization that, just decided to do this yesterday. They've been around a long time, Siemens has. So we'll see.
Well, that's a great example of the difference between what a CFO does and a controller does, looking at that strategic things. What I would also imagine too is when you get to the end of your payback, then you're going to have that extra cash flow and be able to put that money toward doing more upgrades of your not only physical plant, but classrooms, buildings, other things that you critically need to do.
Yeah, great observation, Drum. And you're absolutely right. And that's the ultimate goal. Now, it's going to be several years before we get that payback. The ultimate goal is, you're absolutely right, is to get the physical plan up to date. And then next thing you know, we've got the extra money for cash flow, for programs, for new buildings, classrooms, you name it. That's where we want to get. So we're not having this big heaviness around our neck anymore.
That's fabulous. And I do know that when you're going out and you're doing development work, fundraising, that type of thing, generally it's very difficult to raise funds for building maintenance. But if you've got a good fundraiser, and I'm sure CFOs get involved with this type of thing as well, and say, okay, if someone's going to give us a $10 million grant, which we would all love, for a building, part of it goes for the building construction, but the other should go for deferred maintenance.
Yeah, great point. And interesting enough, we are starting down that pathway too. As a matter of fact, it's funny you bring that up, because the $10 million number, we're doing a $10 million physical plant upgrade through this program with Siemens. And also at the same time, we've started a new building, our new business and IT center on the campus. And it is being funded by a $10 million gift by one of our board members. A wonderful, wonderful gift. Built into that $10 million is exactly what you're talking about, a deferred maintenance depreciation fund, so to speak, to help take care of that building for the next 15 years. It's the way we've got to start doing business. We can't just build a new building anymore and say, well, it's going to last for a long time before we have to do anything to it. Let's worry about that then. All you're doing is giving your trouble to the next generation. And we're not the government. We shouldn't be doing that kind of thing. We're believers. We don't think that's right.
Well, I don't think the government should be doing it either, but that's a whole different kettle of fish.
Yeah, I don't think they should either, but they do it, and I don't think we should be mimicking it.
Exactly. And so that kind of brings us to another area having to do with the outlook toward financial self-sustainability in higher ed. And a recent Gallup Inside Higher Ed poll of CFOs at four-year baccalaureate colleges, 70% of your compatriots believe that higher ed's facing a financial crisis, and only 44% are confident that their college is going to be financially stable in the next 10 years. I mean, that's down from 52% a year ago and 54% a few years back. And so the outlook isn't real good. And I think you made a great point that if we keep doing things the same way we've always done them, we get the same results that we've had, except that the environment's changed and it won't be the same results. It's just going to be worse. So what do colleges need to do to become more financially sustainable?
Well, it's a great point. And we've got to do something different. Even online, people are getting into the online market and they think, well, this is new. Actually, online isn't new anymore. It's the new same old, same old. We've got to get innovative, and this is hard in higher ed. I don't exactly know why. I come more of a business and even ministerial background, but to get the higher ed academic side of the ledger to really understand that education is changing, and to have someone stand in front of a group of students and talk for an hour, the group of people that are willing to do that is getting smaller every year. And we've got to rethink how we do business, or we're going to be out of business. You said it yourself just a few moments ago that if we do the same thing again and again, we're going to get the same result. And I loved how you put it. We're going to get a worse result because things are changing that fast. I've run into corporate executives when we're trying to sell some of our programs. They're telling me that they have to almost, not exact, but almost retrain people from the very beginning outside of a very specific general ed programs in order to get them prepared to do the work they need done. Well, we need to be addressing that. We should not be graduating people that can't step into the marketplace and function almost immediately, but we're not getting it done. And I say that with a very broad brush approach. Some are, obviously, but we really need to get on board and see this. And there's another side to sustainability, too, that has me concerned. I know a few years ago, a number of Christian colleges, especially, were concerned about Title IX and all the title funds, so to speak, the Higher Education Act, and the more and more difficulty that we have of minding the P's and Q's of the Higher Education Act and maintaining our Christian integrity. We breathed a sigh of relief after the election, thinking, okay, they're going to leave us alone now. Well, I hope so, but I don't think we pin our future on hopes. I still think we need to pursue aggressively a more sustainable loan program, similar to what maybe our sister schools in Grove City in Pennsylvania, and perhaps Hillsdale in Hillsdale, Michigan. We need to do something creative like that because the government, I'm afraid, is going to make it harder and harder, not easier and easier for faith schools to survive.
I think you're right. Those are two really interesting programs that they have for student loans. I wish we had the time to talk about those, but maybe on another call.
Yeah, I'd love to talk about them. They're great schools, and they both do it differently, but they've done each of on their own way very successfully.
So, Rob, with some of these changes that are coming out of Washington now from this latest tax cut bill, how is that affecting your institution?
Well, it's just one more something that we've got to deal with. One more regulation, that's not one more, but several more regulations that just make the job even more difficult than what it was literally a year ago. I mean, a lot of people had a lot of hope that feel like, oh, the administration is changing, and so it's going to be so much better. But not necessarily. Everybody has their feelings and their beliefs about government and its involvement in our lives, and I happen to be one. I think the least interference in our lives, the better. And in this case, it becomes more and more intrusive, and thus it makes it harder and harder to do business in higher ed. And I would say more so in Christian higher ed. There's still an animus toward faith-based, I should say, Christian education. So it makes it harder to do business. We need to look for alternatives.
I agree. It's at least under the previous administration, they would spell out, this is what you have to do, and there was more guidance that came out. Now, because the way things have been thrown together so quickly, I mean, how long did it take the tax cut and jobs bill to get through Congress? Maybe 4 weeks without the in-depth study. There's conflicting guidance that comes out that really, from what I've heard, same thing as what you mentioned earlier from other higher ed executives, they're ripping their hair out trying to figure out what it actually means to them.
Yeah, there's no question. You're absolutely right. You have rules that are put together quickly and then passed on to the departments. And now the Department of Education or the Department of Labor, the left hand doesn't know what the right hand is doing. And you got to juggle these. Which one do we do? Because they're different. It's awkward. It's harder to do business from my level than it ever has been. I've been in this business for 20 years, and it's harder today because of all the conflicting rules and regulations from government than it's ever been. And I don't see it getting easier anytime soon.
Yeah, I don't either. I think, yeah, you're right. Don't need to get into political views at this point. It's probably not a good idea.
I agree with you.
Yeah. But the other thing, too, is from a higher ed change perspective, higher ed doesn't want to change in many respects, although they know they need to. And when I say they don't want to, I think administration generally knows it needs to change, but faculty are very slow to change.
Yeah, that's a great perspective. Administrations know they need to. And I understand and have worked in and do work in the what I call the three-legged stool of higher education. You've got the board, you've got three levels of governance, the board, the faculty, the administration. But we need strong administrators these days to say, be able to stand up and be unpopular and say, we've got to get these things done. You might be unpopular when you make the changes, but the long term is you will be popular because you'll save your institutions.
I think you're absolutely right. Sometimes you got to do tough love with them.
Yes.
But, it's also interesting that if you take a look at corporate America, back in the 80s and back in the 90s, there were huge cuts. And, whether you call it downsizing, right-sizing, whatever, there was a lot of cuts made to make things much more efficient. And I don't see that happening in higher ed, and primarily because of faculty, but I think also, too, because of administration. Perhaps part of it is all the regulations that we're dealing with, but we've not become efficient like we need to be.
No, I would agree with you. For years, I did not have an administrative assistant for years. That's just one example. In a highly technological age, there are tools out there. You carry your calendar in your pocket. It's at a fingertip away. And the kind of things that we hire people to do are not hard things sometimes that we at the C level should maybe think about doing. Or in my office suite now, I have one administrative assistant that takes care of three C level individuals. Is she busy? Yeah, she's busy. But you know what? She's okay with that. We pay her a little more and are still saving a lot of money because I'm not hiring three. And we're trying to implement that kind of thinking across the campus. Now, those that are already here, we don't want to alarm people and say you're going to get laid off. We're not doing that. But as openings take place, as people leave, as people retire, we're trying to rethink how we do business. And that's just one tiny example. We have got to start thinking that way. Big business does. Higher education, in the larger sphere anyway, does not. And we've got to. We've got to start thinking that way.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I fully agree with you. And that's, one of the things with shared governance, faculty and administration is I think in some cases, shared governance has gotten out of kilter. Many institutions think shared governance means faculty should have equal say on everything. I personally don't agree with that. I think from a curriculum perspective, absolutely, faculty are the expert, but they also need to be listening to who their quote customer is. And most faculty think and institutions think that the customer is a student. And I would say in part, yes. But I think the other part of the customer equation is what are you doing for businesses? And you mentioned this earlier, businesses having to retrain people who graduate with a 4-year degree instead of them being ready. We need to be listening more to who our customer really is, understanding who that is, and then bringing the faculty in as part of the change process because people support what they help create.
Man, you're right. You've nailed it, Drum, in my opinion. You have nailed it to the wall. We have admissions counselors here that do exactly what you're talking about. Yes, we have admissions counselors that recruit students, but we have admissions people that are going out there visiting in the marketplace too. What do you need? How quickly do you need this? And then we have to come back to the organization and say, faculty, we don't want to interfere in curriculum. You're right. But we do have to rethink the way we deliver education, the way we create an environment for learning. This is hard for faculty to accept, generally speaking. I know there are exceptions out there, but generally speaking, this is hard for some faculty to accept that they can deliver a wonderful product, certainly in an adult environment, in many cases in a non-adult environment as well, a tremendous product without having to spend weeks and weeks and weeks doing so by concentrating, by focusing, by doing a lot of things. It's the business model that needs a reevaluation overall.
I fully agree. One of the challenges, of course, is that the way that we've always been taught, and I'm an academic, I'm a business person as well. What we learned was the baccalaureate degree teaches you how to think. The master's degree make you not an expert, but really educate you in a particular area. And your PhD is bringing new knowledge into existence. And so there needs to be struck a balance between training people how to think, as you do in the undergraduate, and preparing them for a career in whatever their chosen field is. And I don't think we're doing a good job at that at this point.
No, I concur. I don't think we're doing a great job either. I would go so far as to say that sometimes we have to come to the point, especially with our admissions people, college isn't for everybody. We need plumbers. We need carpenters. We need mechanics. And sometimes we need to guide people to a good trade school or community college. Let's be honest with them. We don't want to create a debt for a student, and then they graduate and they can't find a career because we haven't trained them to their skill set. We need to do a better job right up front and being honest with our students. And that's tough because we need enrollment, but we need to have honest enrollment too. And so there's a real mixture but there's no single silver bullet, Drum. You know this better than I do. There's not a single silver bullet. There's a multiple problems with our business model that we need to iron out as a group of colleges, not just one or two of us. We really need to focus on this at a high level.
I think you're absolutely right. And I think one of the things that we should be seeing, I don't know whether we will or not, but we should see a summit of higher education leaders talking about where do we need to go, and not done in isolation, but done in conjunction with business, with employers, this type of thing, to where we can get a roadmap of where we need to go. When we talk about how to work out disagreements between people, you look at two things, really. You look at where it is that you want to go and what are the value systems behind it. And if you can nail those two things down, the roadmap generally becomes pretty clear. We need to do that.
Yes, I agree. The person that can pull that together will rule the education world.
I think so. And frankly, I think that would be a good role for the Department of Ed. Unfortunately, we've got somebody at Ed right now who I don't think is as qualified to do that as we would need.
No, I'm afraid you're right about that. I don't see that coming from Department of Ed anyway, in any way, shape, or form.
Mm-hmm. So we are about at the end of our time, Rob. Just a quick question. What's next for you personally, professionally? Where do you see CIU going? What are some of the great things that you see happening for them in the future and yourself?
Well, that's a great question. For CIU, I see very, very bright days, hopefully the best in the history of the organization. As I mentioned, we're redoing our physical plant, the nuts and bolts of the physical plant. We're building a new business and IT center, and all without any effect to our cash flow, thanks to some creative construction planning, thanks to a generous donor. In addition to that, we're seeing some new recruitment ideas where, matter of fact, our growth this year is going to be nearly 30% over last year, which is just
wow.
Retooling of our business model, a hiring of quality recruiters. Yeah, there was some expense that was upfront to accomplish that, but it's really paying dividends. So I see bright days for CIU. That's why I'm here. I saw a vision of that in the administrators at the time that were here. They knew they needed to do something, and they had a mind to do it. The board had a mind to do it. The board's very supportive of what's happening. So it's fun. And as long as it's fun, and as long as we're popping and moving, I'll be content to be here for a while. I'm 61 years old. I love it as long as we're moving and we have some vision and we have some strategic plans to accomplish that vision and continue to grow. I love it. If that stops, if we start fighting with each other, if we start getting all silo-y again, and it's still, you'll always have that to a certain extent, but I mean in a severe way, I'll get tired of it and I'll have to do something else. It's got to be popping. It's got to be moving. My life is too short at my age to do something I hate. I'm not going to do it. And I love this as long as we're moving. And we are. So it's fun.
That's great. You strike me as a kind of person that out of the song American Pie, it doesn't apply to moss grows fat on a rolling stone.
And when you said American Pie, that threw my old brain back to an earlier day. But yeah, I hope moss isn't growing on me. I don't want it to, I'll tell you that. I've often told the Lord, I said, Jesus, when you're done with me, please just kill me because I don't want to get in the way. If you see me starting to do that, please just take me out because I've seen too many people with their grungy, curmudgeonly, grumpy, oh my goodness, please, we don't need that. We've got to have some open minds and some vision and get things done. Too many souls at stake.
I hear you. I've always subscribed to the baseball bat method. If you're not thinking about what you ought to be doing and your impact on people in your lives, you need a baseball bat between the eyes to get you to wake up.
Yeah, I'll take it. I hope they do that to me before I ruin something. That's for sure.
No doubt. Well, Rob, thanks so much for being on the show. And to all our listeners, thanks for listening this week. This has been fabulous. Thank you for your service to Columbia, to Christian colleges, and also as the board chair for the Association of Business Administrators for Christian Colleges. I know you've done a fabulous job there, and those of us who are members really appreciate that.
Well, it's been a pleasure. Thank you, Drum. I've enjoyed this very much.
Thank you. And our next guest is going to be Mike Goldstein, Senior Partner and Higher Ed Practice Leader for Cooley LLP, one of the top law firms in the country. Mike's going to be talking to us about some of the latest policy changes coming out of Washington and what we can expect on the horizon. Thanks for listening this week, and a special thank you to this week's special guest, Rob Hartman, CFO for Columbia International University and Board Chair for the Association for Business Administrators of Christian Colleges. Our next guest is Dr. Scott Cowan, President Emeritus of Tulane University, where he served as its 14th president for 16 years. Scott's name is synonymous with New Orleans' recovery from Hurricane Katrina, which inflicted more than $650 million in damages to Tulane alone. Scott will talk to us about the importance of leadership, especially leadership in crises, and how you can't and shouldn't attempt this alone. If you like this podcast, please take a minute to subscribe to the show. And if you're listening on the Apple Podcast app, would you please take a moment to give us a rating and review? You can find out more information and show notes at changinghighered.com. And if you have guests and/or other topics you'd like to hear about, please email us at podcast@changinghighered.com to let us know. Remember, creating sustainable higher ed institutions requires three things: taking a holistic view of your institution, aligning strategies, structures, and processes, and ensuring stakeholders are attuned to where you're going. Without any of those three things, you won't get your institution where you want it to go. Until next time.